we had this idea that we were at the forefront of changing pop culture in a big way, and we were wrong, of course. Some things we were right about, some of them we were wrong about, you know. And we thought that sound and vision, we thought that something that was still 6 years away called music television, and we were, you know, we didn't have a name for it, but we knew that it would be, you know, it would be beyond the radio, and it would be people listening to music on TV, and it would involve pictures. We wrongly predicted that would put rock and roll to bed for good. So we weren't even interested in writing rock and roll. We were taking things from rock and roll to create. We were trying to create this new art form. And unfortunately, when MTV showed up, they turned out to, all they did is they really like prolonged the life of rock and roll because they allowed record companies, you know, they fell into the payola thing, and then just, you know, their biggest clients were record companies that were like making Foreigner videos and Loverboy videos, you know, for band, you know, stuff that shouldn't have ever had a video with it in the first place. Most of the videos on MTV shouldn't have ever existed because it was just, you know, like producers and directors being hired to come up with an idea for a band that had a song but had no idea visually. And we were like, that's bullshit. I mean, we were like thinking of film ideas sometimes for a lot of our songs before we made the song. We would like have an idea of something we wanted to shoot, and then we would write a song to go with it, and then we'd make the film.
Would you say you did embrace the whole kind of arrival of MTV with the videos that you made? Things like Whip It were, you know, on heavy rotation MTV at the time.
Well, you know, when MTV first showed up, they embraced Devo because we were the only band that had
interesting videos.
Well, we were the only ones that had videos. You know, there were very few people that had videos then, because there was no reason to make them unless that was your art form. And for us, that was our art form. So we had enough for a full-length, long-form video compilation, even before MTV started.
For a band who were kind of always trying to stay interesting, stay kind of subversive, I guess, in a way. I mean, how did kind of having that kind of success, that kind of public presence kind of affect you at the time?
Well, you know, the only thing bad about Whip It was that it put us on the record company's radar screen. Right. It's like, you know, before that, they kind of were like, oh, we've got some art bands, we've got, you know, Captain Beefheart, and we've got this band Devo, you know. And people go, oh, that's cool, you know, yeah, you know, and they had Sex Pistols for a few minutes and stuff like that. But it was, once we had Whip It, then all of a sudden, we were working on the next album, and then all of a sudden the president of Warner Brothers comes over to the studio in the middle of the night while we're working, and he goes, hey guys, how you doing? We're like, we're fine. Where'd you come from? This is the first time we've ever seen you. You know, what are you doing here? And he's going, hey, I used to mix stuff. You know, maybe you let me take a hand to help you out a little bit. And he sat down at the mixing console, and we're just kind of watching it, and we're going, this is a bad thing. And you know, then it became, you know, you guys can do whatever you want, just do another Whip It. And we became so reactionary to that we went the whole other direction. And we had been reading the National Enquirer. We'd been reading this crazy attempted assassin's poetry. It was, you know, this guy had tried to shoot the president of the United States. And we're reading his poetry and going, you know, if he hadn't tried to shoot the president, this would be damn good poetry. And so we called this guy up. His name is John Hinckley, Jr., and we called him up in Maryland Bethesda Hospital. They let us talk to him. They put us on the phone with John Hinckley. They go, just a minute. And it took like about 10 minutes, and finally John Hinckley, he goes, hello? And we go, hi, this is Mark and Jerry from Devo, and we've been reading your poetry in the National Enquirer, and we want you to know we're fans of your poetry and want to know what you thought about us, you know, using your one of your poems for lyrics of a song. And he went, I got your first album. He says, can I hear it? I go, well, we're going to record it this week, so we'll send you a copy. He goes, okie doke. And that was pretty much it. That's almost. And then we played it for him. He goes, I like it. And that was it. That's all we ever talked. And so he's one of the few people, other than the band members, that are signed to Devo Music. So he still gets a little piddly royalty check every now and then.
Wow.
And of course that made the record company unhappy. That was exactly the opposite of what they were asking us to do. And it's like
calling up an attempted presidential assassin.
Yeah. So then we started getting phone calls from the FBI that would say, I wouldn't go out on tour if I were you. And we're like, what do you mean? They go, well, I want you to know that John Hinckley gets something like 700 death threats every day, and once people hear this song, they're going to be sending you death threat. We never got a death threat, so I don't know who was sending them, what 700 people were sending John Hinckley Jr. death threats, but
maybe
they forgot to send them to us. They never sent them to us. So
I guess early on, probably the most famous kind of concept behind your work is the whole idea of de-evolution and what's involved with that. I mean, how much when you started the band was that done as a kind of prank, or was it always kind of taken very seriously?
Well, I went to, Jerry and I and Bob, we went to college in the late 60s, early 70s. And we were all at Kent State, during the protests. And Jerry was there when the right standing close to one of the people that got shot,
Yeah, I read about it.
We were trying to figure out what we were seeing going on around us in the world, and came to the decision that de-evolution was a better description for it than evolution. And we decided we wanted to talk about it with our music, and that's kind of where it began. And so, we were kind of serious about being funny, and we were kind of humorous about being serious. I mean, the unfortunate thing is that ironic humor wasn't very popular, and it seems like it was confusing to people in the U.S. They're like, well, what are you saying now? You're saying I'm a monkey? I don't get that. You're saying I'm going to turn into a monkey? We're like, well, not really. We're just saying that you are a monkey, sir. It was interesting, but it was complicated, and we were a lightning rod for hostility oftentimes.
Mm. I mean, do you have to just rely on, if you are trying to have this humorous message and this serious message sit on top of each other, do you just have to kind of rely on the power of that serious message and the subversion it's meant to do getting through somehow, kind of subliminally, or do you think there are just going to be some people who just don't get the message ever?
We never thought that everybody was going to fall in love with Devo. We kind of were aware that rebellion and nihilism were both obsolete, and that the only way you could really change things is in this culture is through subversion. So for us, it was kind of like, we thought, if it looked like a pretty dance song, that's why we liked Whip It, only because we thought, well, if it's a nice dance song, everybody will dance to it in the club, and then there'll be a few kids that'll be curious what Devo was about, and they'd start listening to all the lyrics on the songs, and then they might get inspired. And kids did get inspired. I had kids send us, the kind of fan mail we got was different than most bands. We had fan mail where people would say, my major in college is recombinant DNA, and it's because of you guys. And then they'd tell you a story, something that happened and why, and it's like, well, that's kind of interesting,
I mean, has that spirit of kind of de-evolution as an idea to explore and subversion and things like that, the projects that you've worked on that haven't been Devo, has that kind of Devo spirit permeated those projects, do you think? The soundtrack work, the computer games, the theme tunes, that kind of thing? I'll
tell you what I think. I think Devo, the four core members of the band, I think we're kind of like, there's different kinds of artists in the world, but there's one kind of artist that they make their big statement when they're younger, and then everything else they do are permutations on a theme. And then there's another artist that goes out and they work their whole life and they slowly keep getting to whatever it is they're trying to get to. I think we were more like the first kind of artists. I think we kind of made the statement that we believed in when we were young, when we were your age, you know, and then since then, even when we're working on, you know, projects that seem extremely abstract compared to doing an album for a band, I think it ended up becoming like all going back to the same place. I think, you know, I think the different guys in the band, whatever it is that they're working on, I think it all still, to me, I think it's traceable back to ground zero, which is Devo for all of us. I think we were just totally obsessed, you know. We had no choice but to do that. We were compelled to do what we did. And for whatever it was, you know, for all the flaws and for all the different things that were part of it, I just think if you asked anybody in the band, they would say that Devo was their big statement, and I think they all feel the same way about it. I don't think I'm the only one. Maybe Alan, the drummer, he's the only one who might not think the same thing. I remember when he left the band back in like early or mid '80s, he said to me, Mark, when I was a boy, I was Devo. Now I'm a man, I'm Greta. I was like, what's that? And he goes, it's the band I started with my girlfriend. I was like, oh, okay, you're Greta. I said, why are you in Greta? He says, well, because you never appreciated anything that I had to offer. You didn't really, whenever I offered advice, you didn't listen to me. And I go, you're kidding, you never talk. What did you say? He says, well, like take for instance, like with Greta, we needed to buy a PA system, and the band let me pick out the PA system that we were going to use. I said, you don't know anything about PA systems. And he goes, see? So I was like, oh, okay. That's why. So that's when we lost our drummer.
Right. What is next kind of in line for Devo? Not so much like throughout the rest of the year touring and things like that, but kind of artistically, what moves do you have in mind, if any?
We're going to play some live shows, and that to me is I'm only semi-excited about that. The problem being for me is I have a 5 and an 8-year-old kid, and I got homework to do every night, so I can't really tour on big long tours. But that said, you know, it's like there's people that want to do animation shows with us. There's people that want to work on films. We've written films before, and we've written animation shows. So we'll see what happens. It could be either of those could be coming up soon if all goes well.
Great. Well, I really look forward to it, and best of luck with the record. And yeah, just thanks for your time. Really.
Thanks for having me.
Lovely to meet you.